Steve Baker is now a minister at the Brexit department, and as a backbencher he was a leading Leave campaigner. He's even been described as one of the 5 people who made the referendum happen. Let's have a look at him speaking about the EU at an event in 2010.
I think the European Union needs to be wholly torn down. The thing is, of course, that is actually impractical unless the whole people of Europe can be persuaded to rise up and vote for politicians who are prepared in a moderate and consistent and principled and gentle way to say that the European Union project has merely succeeded in raising economic nationalism to the continental scale. That was not its purpose, it was to defeat economic nationalism. It's therefore a failure in its own terms. And that if we wish to devolve power to the lowest possible level, make it accountable, and move on into a free society, then it's clearly incompatible.
Steve Baker, that was you in 2010, saying that you think the EU should be wholly torn down. Do you still think that?
So what I said in that speech, as you heard, was that it was a matter for the electors of Europe, and it is a matter for the electors of Europe. And of course, a lot of time has passed in the last 7 years, many things have happened. One of the things we've seen, which I'm very grateful for, is that the electors of Europe have rejected the kind of nationalist politicians who are Eurosceptics on the continent, and I'm very glad they have. And what they've chosen is to solve the problems of the European Union through further integration by, for example, electing President Macron. So our duty now is to negotiate in good faith, in our mutual interests, to help the European Union succeed and to have that deep and special partnership which is in both our interests.
Well, Emmanuel Macron will be delighted to hear those words from you, but do you still think that the EU should be torn down?
So what I think we need is the European Union to succeed in the interests of all of its people. And what I said in that speech was that I wanted free trade, peace, dispersed political power and democracy. And I don't think those watching this programme will think those things are controversial demands.
No, but do you think those are things that can't happen with the EU as it is? Because you also said the EU is an obstacle to world peace and incompatible with a free society. In what way was it an obstacle, or is it an obstacle to world peace?
So the point I was making there is that when you recognise that economic nationalism causes conflict, for me it's a bad idea to raise that nationalism to the continental scale. But the point is that we are where we are. The European Union needs to change. Jean-Claude Juncker has said it's in an existential crisis. He's recently, I think it was today, it's reported that he's told the European Parliament it's totally ridiculous and threatened to boycott it. These are not happy circumstances.
Well, Jean-Claude Juncker said that because no one turned up to hear him speak in the European Parliament. I mean,
well,
the thing is, if you're saying, well, he was with the Maltese president, but or they were holding the presidency, if you think the EU is an obstacle to world peace, were you saying that countries like France and Germany were obstacles to world peace and a free society?
So what I'm saying is that political power should be dispersed and held accountable in democracies, and that is, of course,
so you do still want it to really collapse?
I certainly don't want it to collapse.
Right.
It's not in the interests of the half a billion people who live in the European Union. What we need to do is ensure that the mistakes which undoubtedly have been made with, for example, the Eurozone, have the opportunity to be corrected so that all of us who share common values in Europe are able to go forward in prosperity together.
So you've fallen into line to some extent with what Theresa May, the Prime Minister, said. She wants the EU to be strong and successful, and David Davis, your boss, is determined to build a strong and special partnership between ourselves and our European allies and friends for the future. You are, of course, now a minister, and you agree with them.
Yes, I agree with them, but 7 years is a long time in politics, not only for us as individuals,
well, it's
but
transformed the EU in 7 years if you thought it was an obstacle to world peace and now it no longer is. Well, that's a miraculous turnaround.
I still have a concern that economic nationalism does cause conflict. So what I want the European Union is to be more liberal, to have more power dispersed under democratic control, to reform, in other words. But happily people agree with me, because you will know that there's a white paper in Europe on European reform, and people are looking seriously at the extent to which powers should change, the extent to which perhaps they should be returned to nation states.
Well, and I'm sure they're listening to every word you've said, but I mean, people might say that actually embarrassing those comments may have been, yes, I take your point, it was 7 years ago, but could it actually risk the UK's ability to secure good Brexit terms when you've made these comments about nation states as part of the EU?
No, not at all, because I'm fully committed to the position that the government has set out. We're negotiating in good faith, to deliver a successful relationship which we believe we can achieve, and I'm looking forward to doing it in the interests of not only the United Kingdom but the European peoples.
And in terms of Emmanuel Macron, you must be pleased then to see that he thinks the Eurozone can be rejuvenated, that actually this is an opportunity for the EU to be liberated without Britain. They'll be able to go ahead without the veto constantly by the UK.
Well, that is, of course, an extremely good point, and one of the reasons why we needed to come out of the European Union, because we were an impediment to them doing what is necessary to rescue the economy of the Eurozone. I repeat what I said perhaps 7 years ago. I want free trade, peace, prosperity, dispersed power.
I think we all want those things.
Delighted to discover we don't think those comments are controversial.
Just
but
briefly.
What we need to do is make sure that the European Union has the best possible chance of succeeding for the people within it. We are now where we are, and that is going to mean a degree of fiscal centralisation to make the Eurozone work.